27F. Accidentally had my baby in my friend's 31F car. Now her husband and she don't want to speak to me. How do I fix this? I'm very aware that this sounds ridiculous, and honestly, writing it out makes it sound even stranger. But I'm so tired of constantly worrying about this situation that I really need some outside perspective, or at least a place to put all of this down. This all happened almost 2 weeks ago now, and while so much has happened since then, I can't seem to stop thinking about it. At the time, I was almost 38 weeks pregnant. My pregnancy had been pretty straightforward medically, but physically, I had been uncomfortable for a long time. Everything felt heavy, tight, and exhausting. I had been feeling different kinds of discomfort for weeks, and everyone kept telling me it was normal at that stage. Because of that, I didn't really question it when I felt off that day. I had already gotten used to being uncomfortable all the time. My partner left that afternoon to help out her brother. We talked about it beforehand, and were both completely fine with it. She wasn't going far, about an hour-and-a-half drive, and we genuinely didn't think anything would happen. Neither of us saw this coming at all. I wasn't overdue, and there were no clear warning signs that labor was about to start. Since I would be alone for most of the day, my friend Alice offered to come over and spend the day with me so I wouldn't be by myself. She's 31, and we've been friends for a while. She's someone I trust, someone I feel safe with, and at the time, it felt like a really thoughtful thing for her to do. Honestly, it was really nice having her there. We didn't do anything special. We watched movies, talked, and just hung out. It felt calm and normal, which was comforting. Even though I was physically uncomfortable throughout the day, I didn't think much of it. I had been uncomfortable for ages, so nothing felt particularly alarming. If anything, having Alice there helped distract me from focusing too much on how my body felt. At some point, though, things shifted. It wasn't sudden or dramatic at first. It was more like a growing realization that what I was feeling wasn't staying the same. The discomfort became more intense and harder to ignore. Alice noticed before I fully accepted it myself. She asked me if I was okay and if what I was feeling seemed different from usual. That's when it really hit both of us that this might actually be labor. I called my wife right away. We talked through what was happening and considered waiting until she got back. She was already on her way home, and for a moment, it felt like maybe we could just hold on until she arrived. I really wanted that. I wanted her there. But things escalated quickly. What had felt manageable suddenly felt urgent. Everything started happening fast, faster than I was prepared for. The discomfort turned into something I couldn't breathe through easily anymore, and it became clear that waiting might not be an option. That's when I asked Alice if she could drive me to the hospital. She agreed. She didn't hesitate, and she didn't complain. She helped me get ready, helped me into the car, and did exactly what I needed in that moment. At the time, I wasn't really thinking about how overwhelming this must have been for her. I was focused entirely on what was happening in my body and on trying to stay calm. We didn't make it to the hospital. Somewhere along the way, it became obvious that there was no turning back. I ended up giving birth to my daughter in Alice's car. Technically, her husband's car. Even now, typing that out feels unreal. It still doesn't fully register as something that actually happened to me. We were incredibly lucky. Despite everything, both my baby and I are okay. I did have a few complications afterward, but those have resolved now. Our daughter is healthy and absolutely perfect. She is everything she should be. My wife, understandably, is having a hard time with having missed the birth. That's been painful in its own way, and I know she's still processing that. But we're trying to focus on what matters most right now. The tiny human we brought into the world completely unexpectedly. As overwhelming as all of that was, it isn't actually the part that's been haunting me the most. What's really been weighing on me is everything that happened afterward, especially with Alice and her husband. And that's where I don't know what to do. The days immediately after everything happened were a blur. There was so much going on at once that it was hard to keep track of time. Hospital staff coming in and out, questions being asked, instructions being given, and all of it layered on top of the physical aftermath of giving birth. My body felt sore, weak, and strangely disconnected, like I was still trying to catch up with what had just happened. Alice stayed with me until things were stable. I remember noticing that she seemed shaken, even though she tried to stay calm. At the time, I didn't really know how to acknowledge that properly. I was overwhelmed, emotional, and focused on my baby and on the fact that everything hadn't gone according to plan. I felt nothing but gratitude toward her, but I don't think I fully understood yet what that experience might have been like from her side. When my wife arrived, everything shifted again. There was relief, love, and happiness all tangled together with sadness and frustration. She was there now, holding our daughter, but she had missed the birth entirely. I could see how much that hurt her, even as she tried to be present and supportive. We talked about it later, and we're still talking about it, but in those first days, it was just another emotional weight added on top of everything else. Once we were home and things became a little quieter, I finally had space to think. That's when Alice really started to occupy my thoughts. I kept replaying the day in my head and wondering how it must have felt for her. She had come over expecting to keep a very pregnant friend company, watch some movies, and pass the time. Instead, she ended up in an emergency situation, driving to the hospital, and witnessing a birth in the confined space of her husband's car. I felt awful about that. 2 days later, once I felt slightly more human again, I decided to message her. I didn't want to let too much time pass without acknowledging what she had done for me. I thanked her again for everything, trying to put into words how grateful I was. I also mentioned the car, telling her, genuinely and sincerely, that she should please send me a bill for having it cleaned. I tried to keep the tone light, but I meant it seriously. I wasn't trying to joke or brush it off. I just didn't want the message to feel overly heavy or formal, especially given how emotionally charged everything already was. When she didn't reply right away, I told myself not to read into it. She might have been busy. She might have needed time. She might not have known how to respond. I didn't want to pressure her, so I waited. Eventually, she liked the message. That was all. At first, I tried to see it as acknowledgement. At least she had seen it. At least she knew I was grateful and taking responsibility. But the lack of words stuck with me more than I expected it to. It felt distant, impersonal, and unlike her. Over the next few days, I sent a couple more messages. Nothing dramatic. Just checking in, asking how she was doing, hoping to open a line of communication. Each time, there was no reply. That's when I started to feel uneasy. This wasn't normal for her. Alice had always been responsive, even when things were awkward or uncomfortable. The silence felt deliberate, like a door slowly closing without me understanding why. Then her husband messaged me. His message was short, angry, and direct. He told me not to message Alice anymore. He congratulated me on the baby, but followed it immediately with anger about his car, thanking me for fucking it up. Reading that made my stomach drop. I understood that he was upset. I really did. His car had been turned into the site of an emergency birth, something no one would ever expect or want to deal with. But the way he spoke to me felt harsh and final, like I had done something unforgivable. I didn't respond right away because I honestly didn't know what to say. I felt ashamed and guilty, but also confused. I had never tried to avoid responsibility. I had offered to pay for cleaning immediately. I wasn't pretending nothing had happened. And yet, it felt like I was being shut out completely. What hurt most was the suddenness of it all. One moment, Alice had been there for me during one of the most intense moments of my life. The next, I was being told not to contact her, with no explanation beyond anger. There was no conversation, no chance to clarify, no space to understand what she might be feeling. I also couldn't ignore how out of character this felt, especially coming from her. Her husband and I had never been particularly close, and I had always felt uncomfortable with the way he sometimes spoke to her, but we had always been friendly enough. Civil, normal. Now it felt like that connection had vanished overnight. I started questioning everything I had done since the birth. I wondered if my initial message about the car had come across as insensitive, even though I meant it seriously. I wondered if trying to keep things light had been a mistake. Maybe it sounded like I was minimizing the situation. Maybe I should have been more explicit, more apologetic, more careful. The more I thought about it, the worse I felt. I couldn't tell if I was overthinking or if I had genuinely handled this badly. After that message from her husband, everything started to feel heavier. I tried to focus on my baby, on healing, on settling into this completely new rhythm of life, but my thoughts kept circling back to Alice. It wasn't constant panic or distress, more like a dull, persistent ache that surfaced whenever things got quiet. Late at night, early in the morning, in those in-between moments when there was nothing else demanding my attention, I kept thinking about how quickly everything had changed between us. One day, she was sitting next to me on the couch, watching movies and keeping me company. She was holding my hand when things started to feel real. She was driving me to the hospital, talking to me, helping me breathe, staying present in a situation that would have overwhelmed a lot of people. And then, suddenly, there was nothing. No messages, no check-ins, just silence and then anger filtered through her husband. I started wondering whether I had completely misjudged how she experienced that day. Maybe what felt overwhelming but manageable to me had been terrifying for her. Maybe she had gone home afterward and realized she couldn't stop replaying it in her head. The sounds, the urgency, the lack of control. Giving birth is intense even when you're prepared for it. Being unexpectedly present for it in a car with no warning, that's something else entirely. The more I thought about it, the more I worried that I had traumatized her. That thought made me feel sick. I didn't want to believe that something so important and meaningful in my life could be tied to fear or distress for someone I cared about. I didn't want my daughter's birth to be remembered by someone else as a moment of panic or helplessness. And yet, I had to acknowledge that it might be exactly that for Alice. At the same time, I didn't know how to address it without making things worse. Reaching out again felt like pushing against a clear boundary. Her husband had explicitly told me not to message her. Ignoring that felt wrong, even though I didn't know whether that boundary was coming from her or from him. I didn't want to assume. I didn't want to cause more harm by insisting on contact if she genuinely needed space. But not reaching out at all felt wrong too. It felt like abandoning the situation, like quietly accepting that I had hurt someone deeply and then walking away because it was uncomfortable to face. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to pretend that everything was fine or that this didn't matter just because my own life had become overwhelming in other ways. I also couldn't stop questioning the way I had initially handled things. I replayed that first message over and over in my head. I wondered if trying to sound lighthearted had been a mistake. Even though I was sincere about paying for the cleaning, maybe the tone didn't match the gravity of what had happened. Maybe it sounded like I was trying to smooth things over too quickly, without fully acknowledging the shock and disruption she had been through. I started thinking about all the ways I could have phrased things differently. I could have apologized more explicitly. I could have acknowledged the emotional impact more clearly. I could have asked how she was feeling instead of focusing on logistics. But hindsight is painfully precise. At the time, I was still bleeding, still exhausted, still trying to process the fact that my baby had arrived in a way I never imagined. I did the best I could with the emotional bandwidth I had. That didn't stop the guilt from settling in anyway. I also found myself thinking more critically about her husband's role in all of this, not in an accusatory way, but with a growing sense of discomfort. The way he spoke to me in his message felt unnecessarily aggressive, and it made me wonder how Alice was doing. Whether she was being supported, or whether she was absorbing a lot of anger herself. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I didn't want to project my own unease onto their relationship, but I couldn't ignore that his voice was now the only one reaching me, and it wasn't a gentle one. All of this left me feeling stuck. I didn't know whether the kindest thing to do was to step back completely and respect the silence, or to find another way to reach out that didn't involve direct messaging. I thought about asking a mutual friend to check in on her, but even that felt risky. I didn't want to make Alice feel cornered or talked about. At the same time, I didn't want this to end with resentment and unresolved hurt if there was any chance to prevent that. I kept asking myself the same questions over and over. Had I crossed an unspoken line by involving her so directly in something so intense? Had I mishandled the aftermath badly enough to push her away? Or was I being too hard on myself for a situation that was genuinely out of my control? There were no clear answers, just a constant sense of unease. And the longer the silence went on, the more it felt like whatever I chose to do next mattered more than anything I had already done.